Viktor Frankl said, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms. To choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's way." This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson. Stay tuned for the next hour as Sue explores the human psyche, what makes us tick, and how to live better, more fulfilled and more meaningful lives. Only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson, and I'm back in the studio with Craig, and it's really nice to be back here. I was away for a while, and then, and of course over Passover, but we're back again, and it's good to be here. Today, I'm actually going to dedicate today's program to the Israel Defense Force, the IDF. They have worked and non-stop to try to keep us safe, to keep Israel safe, to give their heart and soul to their nation, our nation. And while the hostages are still being held in Hamas captivity, the fighting will continue. And I was going to say that this program today was going to be called Evil, but I decided that actually there's so much more in the world other than evil. But Aristotle did say that evil destroys even itself. And I am hoping that that's what's going to happen, because evil is in our world at the moment. And first we overlook evil, then we permit evil, then we legalize evil, then we promote evil, then we celebrate evil, then we persecute those who still call it evil. And Isaiah says, "Woe unto them who call evil good and good evil." And I thought, how true, how often is evil overlooked, especially when it concerns the Jews. And we have been incredibly hurt, Jews in South Africa, by our government's stance towards Israel. But then an incident occurred just before Passover, where there was a protest at the Pick n Pay Norwood, and the protest was against Israel, and it was actually against the Star of David, a symbol of our faith, being displayed over the Passover aisle with Passover items. I mean, can you believe it? And unfortunately, the protesters got their way, and those Stars of David were removed. Now, can you imagine if for Easter there were crosses put up on the aisle with all there was particular Easter food, not simply eggs, but the Christmas food, like there is at Christmas time for Christmas cakes and everything. Can you imagine a protest of people going in and ripping down the crosses, a symbol of Christianity? There would have been unbelievable outcry over that. But unfortunately, there was not much that was said about the protest, and the Jewish board got involved. And quite honestly, we are not sitting back and doing nothing. We are not sitting ducks, that's for sure. We will talk out, and the Jewish board did exactly that, and the Star of David was put back.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
This is Sue Jackson, and I'm back on my program. And I was talking about how hurt we were as Johannesburg Jews, certainly, and what had happened when a protest in one of the leading stores was against Israel and against also the items brought in from Israel, but mostly about our Star of David. And that was taken down. It was a terrible shock to us all. It really was. But as I say, our Jewish board got involved, and immediately they said how hurt we all were, The star was put back, but the damage was done. And that's what people were hoping for. But we don't give in to hatred like that, quite honestly. We do not behave like that. And this was particularly shown to me over Passover. Now, over Passover, we celebrate the going out from Egypt. And after terrible plagues, and we were eventually, the Israelites were literally told to leave, and they did. But a lot of things happened in between, obviously, and you can all read on about that. But one of the things that really struck me was that at every single service that I went to, or Seder, which is the meal, the particular meal on the first and second nights of Passover especially, how no one was talking about hatred, blame, racism. Nobody even mentioned this. But somehow I think we could all identify with the story of the Jews' escape from Egypt. It was so real. It was almost as though it's happening now in Israel since the 7th of October 2023, when evil was really put upon the whole world. Do not think it was only Israel. We call it the butterfly effect, and it's the effect that if a butterfly flaps its wings in Guatemala, for instance, it could cause a tornado, maybe in South Africa or wherever. It's that effect that something that large and sometimes even a small occurrence can affect the entire world. And that's what has happened since the October the 7th massacre in Israel. And I do believe that we all are being asked at the moment to step forward. And I got this wonderful message on one of the groups that I'm on, and I actually asked if I could mention it today. Haven't got a reply, so I'm not going to say who it was from, but I'm just finding it at the moment because I wanted to tell you. It was a take on the Passover. Sorry, I've got a sore throat today. And it was a take on Nachshon. Nachshon was the person who walked in to the Sea of Reeds, and as he walked in, the water went up to his knees. It went deeper up to his waist. It went deeper up to his neck. And he carried on walking. He was the first one who went forward, and others then followed. And this person who sent this message was incredibly good, and he said, it was somebody's husband who sent it in, and he said, as we come to the final days of Passover, it's easy to feel like we've already reached the end of the journey. We told the story. We dipped the parsley. We leaned like kings and tried to explain why we still eat cardboard, which is the matzah, of course, with horseradish, with grain. But in the Torah, the journey isn't over. And he goes on to talk about one more dramatic and moving moment in the history, the splitting of the Sea of Reeds. But the real power of the story is what happened just before the sea split. And our sages teach us that the sea didn't part when Moses raised his staff. It didn't part because of thunder or lightning or even prayer. It parted when one man, Nachshon ben Aminadav, walked straight into the water. He walked in deeper and deeper, ankle, knee, waist, chest, until the water reached his neck. And only then, when he risked everything, did the sea split. That moment teaches a lesson that's just as important now as it was then. Freedom doesn't come when everything is ready. Freedom begins when we take a step even when we don't know what will happen next. How beautiful is that? And he goes on to say, there are Nakshans in every generation. And he mentions where he has seen it. And he said, I see it in those who choose to join the Jewish people, who take brave, bold steps into unfamiliar territory, sometimes against all odds. They walk forward with deep commitment like Nakhshan did, trusting the sea will split and their steps strengthen all of us. And then he goes on to say, I see it in every parent who keeps moving forward without a map, without a guarantee, just with her love and a little hope that the next step is the right one. And that is what we are being asked at the moment. When the sea doesn't split, walk anyway, he says. When the answers aren't clear, or the healing feels far, or the future feels uncertain, walk anyway. Because sometimes the miracle isn't the sea splitting. Sometimes the miracle is the courage to walk in. And that is exactly what we are all being asked to do at the moment. Walk on with our heads held high. You know, there was just before when Passover was on, a whole lot of the hostage families and other supporters went to the border of Gaza, and they shouted, they screamed, they stood on the side shouting as loudly as they could, hoping that their loved ones held in Hamas captivity could hear their cry of love. And that was also, that's one of the Nakhshan moving forward. They were not just relaxing and saying, we'll wait for Israel or the IDF to free our loved ones. We will do whatever we can to offer some sort of comfort to them if they can hear our cries of love. Now, I know that many people, many of us, not only Jews, but Christians as well, are feeling very disheartened.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, I'd like you to now hear a very short audio clip by Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory, and it's called, Doesn't All the Evil in the World Show There Is No God?
The challenge to faith of the existence of evil, how can a good God allow evil to flourish in the world, is the oldest and deepest challenge to faith. If we look in the Bible, we see it's not asked by the skeptics, it is asked by the real heroes and heroines of faith. Abraham asks, shall the judge of all the earth not do justice? Moses says, how and why have you done evil to this people? The whole book of Job is taken up with this question. And I asked myself that question as I stood for the first time in Auschwitz-Birkenau, where in the space of a couple of years, 1.25 million human beings, including 250,000 children, were gassed, burned, and turned to ash. Where was God at Auschwitz? And suddenly standing there, the answer came to me. God was in the words, thou shalt not murder. He was there in the words, thou shalt not oppress a stranger. He was there in the words, your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground. And when God speaks and human beings don't listen, there is nothing even an all-powerful God can do. Because if there is one thing he will never do, it is take away our freedom. I call the faith of the Hebrew Bible God's call to responsibility. He is telling us, I alone cannot eliminate evil from the world and still allow you to be human, still allow you to be free. Therefore, I need your help in putting out the fire that is consuming civilization in its flames.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue, and you were just listening to Lord Jonathan Sacks, and he was talking about does all the evil in the world show there is no God? And very definitely, we are looking at the moment at the evil that has been unleashed on the world, and I think many of us are questioning. And he talks about your brother's blood is crying out to us. And I think if we, as a collective, as Jews in collective, not in the diaspora, and of course in Israel, we know that the thousands who were killed and maimed in the October massacre, plus since then in this ongoing war, there are so many voices crying out to us to say, please help us. And he talks about responsibility. Now, it's not responsibility from an issue, no. It's a responsibility to something. What is our responsibility? It's not to say that we have no responsibility in this. It's happening elsewhere. It's not happening to us. That's not true. Whatever is happening elsewhere is happening to us too. So what are we going to do about it? How are we going to change the world for the better in our own space? Are we going to be the Nachshons who went into the sea and up to his neck before it parted, and before then all the Israelites followed? Are we going to be that Nachshon who shows the world the best part of ourselves? Or are we going to be the one who shows hatred, violence? I just think we need to understand we are being called to a responsible life at the moment. And even though we are facing what is incredibly painful at the moment, we have choices always. And I read something the other day, and it said the refrain of all Jews today is no words. No words. Just the sound of our collective hearts breaking. And I thought, wow, I actually wanted to almost cry when I read that, because that's exactly what it is. And then we keep being told, think about peace and two-state solution, and so it goes on. But I must admit, I thought I was pretty tolerant until I saw what was happening when the babies, those little Bibas babies, those beautiful little red-haired little children, little babies, were brutally murdered in Hamas captivity, with their mother, Shiri, as well. And Shiri's parents, by the way, were also murdered at the kibbutz in October 2023. And when I saw the coffins of those two little babies being taken through this crowd of Gazans, with people cheering and shouting, and when other coffins came through, music was blaring. There was just no regard, no respect for life, for lost life. And there were fathers with children on their shoulders showing them these little coffins, and they were shouting, and I was totally shocked. So I don't know how we can, even at the moment, we're going to have to work very, very hard on ourselves to find the compassion that we're going to be needing. There was an estimated 5,000 people that attacked and invaded Israel in October. 2,000 terrorists aligned with Hamas and Islamic Jihad, plus a further 3,000 Gazans who were unaffiliated. So when we now are seeing the protests against Hamas in Gaza, I think a lot of us are feeling a bit skeptical about everything. But I don't want to dwell on that too much. But what I also want to say is that while we are being attacked on CNN, on BBC, all the time. You turn on any news, you'll hear what's happening in Israel. And it will always be anti-Israel. Have we heard about what's been happening in Nigeria in April? Right. We are in April now. Now, in Nigeria, there was this unbelievable gun and machete massacre. And there have been 2 attacks in 2 weeks. People were chopped to pieces. 100 people plus were murdered. They were hacked to death. There was random shooting. There was no one that was spared, even a 9-month-old baby. But have we heard much about that? No. What about the KFC, the Kentucky Fried Chicken franchise in Pakistan? Mobs have been storming into the stores. They've set some alight. And meanwhile, why? Because they say that they are supporters of Israel. In the meantime, the KFC franchise employed 25,000 people in Pakistan. And, with 25,000 people will be out jobs if KFC had to leave. But do we hear about that? No, we don't. So how on earth are we expected to trust the media, to trust others, when everything seems to be against us? I will tell you what I myself believe. I believe that we are being called to still be human, to find the humanness in ourselves, to recognize that no matter what is happening, we cannot give in to hate. We can't become a hate-filled nation. Even with the Holocaust Memorial coming up now, and there's denial of it, even though it's documented. My own father went through Bergen-Belsen. So you know what, the generations since the Holocaust have been educated, or should have been educated, in everything that has been shown on it. And even with the massacre, the October massacre by Hamas, once again, the perpetrators even videoed it themselves, and yet it's still being denied. How on earth can that happen? I love to listen to Douglas Murray because he's one of our greatest supporters of Israel. And this is something that he often talks about. How on earth can we believe what's being told to us when it's always most of it is a lie? And he is a true champion and a friend of Israel. And when he mentions the pro-Palestinian protests around the world, he says the only flags shown at those protests have been the Palestinian flag. Whereas the pro-Israel marches, the Israeli flag is shown and the flag of the host nations. Now, at a march in London, he mentioned that the pro-Israel marchers sang the Israeli anthem, Hatikva, which means hope, and then God Save the King. And I like that thought, that we are told that we have to respect our host nation. At the moment, it's a bit difficult to respect our particular government right now. But we are being called to do what we can, and people all over the world are doing unbelievable things, not just for Jews, but for everybody. Please look at anything in South Africa, look in Johannesburg in particular if you want to, only because I happen to live here. And if you see all the outreach programs, you will see that the Jews have started many, many of those. And my own grandchildren are involved in outreach programs to communities less fortunate than we are. Albert Einstein said the world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing. So what I am asking of all people listening to us, or who might hear something against the Jews, please, educate yourselves. You know, there's a wonderful publication called Lay of the Land, and it says reliable reportage and insightful commentary on the Middle East by seasoned journalists from the region and beyond. And it's a very fair publication, Lay of the Land. And you'll find incredible articles there to read. The one that was brought out on the 16th of April said South Africa trying to make it a crime to visit Israel. And this was an article by Kenneth Mokakwa Wakagagwadi, I don't know how you pronounce that. Anyway, he says, as a black South African who has spent almost a year studying in Israel's Ben Gurion University of the Negev, I can surely decide for myself what is important and what is true and what is not. I know when a lie is being perpetuated to fulfill a political goal, especially in my home country of South Africa. It is for this reason that I applaud everyone who visits Israel to see for themselves what is happening. And he goes on to say why the big hullabaloo over a group of South African members of parliament that included members of the DA, the Democratic Alliance, and the PA, the Patriotic Alliance, both of whom are in the governing coalition with the ANC, as well as the African Christian Democratic Party, who visited Israel recently on a fact-finding mission. And it's being portrayed in some quarters, notably the economic freedom fighters, as nothing less than a betrayal of South Africans and Palestinians. He goes on to say, what nonsense! The Israel hate being fueled in South Africa is now so obsessive, with the EFF even demanding these well-meaning lawmakers, who can be accused of nothing more than having inquiring, independent minds, to have their diplomatic privileges suspended pending investigation. I actually could not believe what I was reading. And I'd really encourage you to look up Lay of the Land and see this article, because he goes on, he talks about one of the mass media methodologies referred to as framing, exposes how the media can shape how audiences understand and interpret events. And he says we see this explicitly in the Israel-Palestine conflict, whereby the international media takes sides and then escalates tensions by identifying the victim while isolating the bad guy. It's a long article, so please read it. The other article that if you get a chance to read, is also called An Unexpected Fifth Son. And it's our first encounter at a Passover Seder left this Cape Townian enriched by the experience. He is not a Jewish person, and he hadn't even planned on it, but he said a friend asked him if he wanted to attend, and he said yes. It was at the Garden Shul in Cape Town. And this is by Tim Flack. And Tim, thank you so much also for what you had to say about that protest at Pick and Pay Norwood. Really appreciate what you had to say. So please, let's educate ourselves. Let's see what is actually being asked of us, what is being given to us, and to recognize that each of us is being asked to be a Nachshon. I'm sorry, I keep having to just take a sip of water because of my throat. It's a bit strange that it's behaving like this. I would like to, at this stage, also mention the passing of the Pope, and to wish all our Christian, our Catholic listeners especially, deep condolences on the loss of Pope Francis. I thought it's unbelievably appropriate for him that he should die just after the Easter Sunday. What an amazing time to pass away. His last message was to ask for peace in the world, especially in the war-torn areas, and we wish him. We send blessings to all his followers.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program, and you're about to listen to another very short audio clip by Rabbi Jonathan Sacks on the dignity of difference.
It seems to me that in the 21st century we are going to face again the problem that humanity last faced in the 17th century, when the face of Europe was scarred by something like a century of wars of religion. And again today we are coming to a situation where, as Samuel Huntington put it, we're in a clash of civilizations. And once again the Christian West and the world of Islam are clashing, as they did in the Crusades, and as I say, as Christianity did within itself in the 17th century. And we are going to have to come up with a solution. And the solution cannot be the solution that was in the 17th century, because there they dealt with it by secularizing power. Now, today you can't secularize power because conflict has gone global, and many of the people wielding power are very religious indeed. The world is desecularizing. And therefore, we are going to have to do it from within the religions themselves. To put it bluntly, either religion is part of the solution or it will be a very large part of the problem. So how can Jews, Christians, and Muslims do what they have failed to do for so many centuries? Learn to live together. And that is when I coined the phrase, the dignity of difference. Somehow or other, we worship the same God, and yet we hate the fact that other people worship God in ways that are different from us. But what if we took God seriously and said maybe God is bigger than religion? Maybe God is worshipped by me in my way and by you in your way, and maybe all our prayers converge in infinity, the infinity we call God. One way or another, we are going to have to learn the dignity of difference if we are to live together in a century in which our powers of destruction have grown so great that either we live together or, God forbid, we will die together.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue, and you were just listening to Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks on the dignity of difference. Now, that was recorded during, I think, even before COVID, and it's just incredibly relevant to our lives today and has gone on being relevant forever. I have a few nice things to also share with you. That I wanted to talk about community for a moment, because I think in this time of unease at the moment, we are needing to get involved with community. And as Jews, certainly we have this collective of our synagogues, but at the churches as well. Someone is coming on. I'm having someone. I'm not going to mention his name right now. Coming on next Tuesday, and we're going to be talking about the anti-Semitism. Certainly, he is a pastor, but also the renewal of Christianity. And the other day, I read a very interesting article on how you cannot believe how many people are streaming into the churches at the moment, and especially over Easter. Apparently, it was just so amazing to see people returning to religion. I think what happens is when everything seems so dark, so frightening, that we do turn to community, to friends, to try and feel a little bit safer. Now, in the Jewish community, we have so many opportunities to connect with one another. Every Shabbos, every Saturday, every night for the men who are going to the shul every night and every morning. There are always these unbelievable things going on, and I need to give a shout out to Rabbi Aftzon from Linksfield Synagogue, who he and his team have done unbelievable miracles over Passover. I can't believe what they did. But I was there on Sunday and at the synagogue, and it was such a good feeling to be welcomed, for people to come up and wish me good Yontif and where have you been and hello, and to know that I had been missed and people were pleased to see me. There's a wonderful feeling in that recognition, and I think that's what we need to start offering one another. The recognition that we each deserve. Every one of us deserves to be recognized for the unique individual that we are. And it's really a good feeling. Now, when we are out, for instance, I was out shopping the other day at one of the spa shops, and I could see that the one cashier was a bit upset. Something had happened just before I got into that line. And I just said to her, how are you? You're looking upset. And her eyes filled with tears. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to get her into trouble with the manager. And she just said, thank you for asking. I can't talk about it, but thank you for recognizing it. And that's what we are being asked to do, to recognize the uniqueness of each of us. And there was something that I read also the other day, and it said, we're all visitors to this time, this place. We are just passing through. Our purpose here is to observe, to learn, to grow, to love, and then we return home. And I thought, how beautiful to our purpose, to observe, to learn, to grow, and to love. And that is what we're being asked to do. If you would like to contact me, please do so on 061 895 let me just think, 895 1019. So 061 895 1019. Thank you to all of you who've come up to me, whether it's been in the synagogue or at the shops, to talk about my program and to tell me what you would want from me to talk about, but also for your encouragement. I really do appreciate it. The lay of the land, I would suggest, as I said, that you all go onto it. And when I was telling you about Tim Flack and how his first encounter at a Passover Seder enriched this Cape Townian's the experience for him. And he said a kind friend had asked him if he'd ever been to one, and he said, no, I'm not Jewish. He said, not being Jewish. When I said no, she quietly arranged for me to attend the annual Seder at the Gardens Synagogue. I knew the Gardens Synagogue, also known as the Great Synagogue, and it had been established in 1841, making it the oldest congregation in South Africa. I myself didn't know that, I must admit. And he said he went alone, and to be honest, he was nervous. He said he had never been to a synagogue before, so I don't think he knew what to expect. And he said he went through the necessary security checks and felt completely out of place. I'm going to get back to that shortly.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
You've now got the final audio clip of today's program, and it's called Is the Capacity for Forgiveness Intrinsic to Human Nature? And it's also by Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sacks.
The capacity for forgiveness as such is not an intrinsic part of human nature. We know that all sophisticated life, and this applies to primates as well as to humans, have conflict resolution techniques. You can call those appeasement. The ancient Greeks had this concept of appeasement. I didn't do it, or if I did, it wasn't that important, or if it was that important, I feel bad about it. And you go through a gesture of submission and self-abasement, and you hope that somebody will forget the offense against them. Forgiveness as such only enters the world when we move from what is called a shame ethic to a guilt ethic. And a guilt ethic separates between the act and the person. The act was bad, but the person remains deep down untarnished. And therefore, that sense of when I repent and make restitution and so on, I am capable not of just making you forget the whole thing or ignore it, but actually do this extraordinary act called forgiving, which appears really in human history with the story of Joseph and his brothers at the very end of Genesis. His brothers have wanted to kill him. They sold him as a slave. And eventually he reconciles with them and forgives them. And fascinatingly, it's only after that God forgives. He forgives the Israelites for the sin of the golden calf after the pleadings of Moses. So forgiveness has to do with a specific culture. It is one of the great contributions of the Judeo-Christian heritage to humankind. And it was Hannah Arendt who pointed out how very, very important forgiveness is, because it is one of the very few things that breaks the hold of the past. It liberates us from this eternal consequence and the eternal echo of the bad things we've done in the past. It allows us to create a new world going forward. So I think some form of conflict resolution is universal. But this very specific form of forgiveness is one of the great gifts of the Judeo-Christian heritage to humankind.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, that was Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs talking about forgiveness, and it's something I know I myself must work on, but as long as the hostages are held in Hamas captivity, I find it difficult to even think of forgiveness. I was telling you about Tim Flack. I would like you to read it yourselves on Lay of the Land, but he just went on to say that once he got to the synagogue for the Seder, he says, I'm a big guy in a white kippah, a knitted skull cap and a Star of David on it. He said he picked this kippah because he's an unashamed Zionist. And he said that's another story. And with a yellow ribbon pinned to his shirt and a full Japanese tattoo sleeve. And he said he knew that he stood out. And as he made his way up the stairs to the Seder hall, he sat down with some people who welcomed him. But it's a very nice story, so I would really like you to go on and read it if you can. I started by saying that I was going to be dedicating this program to the Israel Defense Force. And then I told a story about Nachshon, the man who went first into the Sea of Reeds and before the waters parted and all the Israelites followed. But I do believe that when I said earlier that Nachshon, we all know Nachshons in our lives, and I do believe that the Israel Defense Force and are Nachshons. They have gone in where most people would fear to tread. Their courage to enter unknown territory for the sake of their religion, their culture, their country, their loved ones is unbelievable. And I take my hat off to all of them, so many of them 18, 19-year-old youngsters, and so many killed. We very seldom hear about the ones killed because Israel does not publish it, not like the exaggerated numbers that we see from other places. So this program is dedicated to the IDF for fighting this ongoing battle and for living with uncertainty and yet moving forward into that uncertainty, so that we in the diaspora and in Israel who are fighting an existential war can go forward with knowing that they are there to help us, but we cannot rely totally on the IDF. We have to rely on ourselves as well. We have to do whatever we can to stop the evil that is going and plaguing the world at the moment. And I'd like to end with Albert Einstein's quote, "The world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do not do a thing." In other words, do nothing. And I would like to end with that, but you're going to be listening after this program to Louis Armstrong singing "What a Wonderful World." Let's hold on to those words, what a wonderful world, and please God, that's what will happen. We will be living in a world of peace where brother will welcome brother of all different religions to one another. We'll welcome each other. Thank you, and I'm sorry about my croaky voice. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Vusi and Makundi. Thanks very much.